I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, episode number 120. This podcast is for attorneys who are running their own firms. We explore tactics, tools, and stories related to pushing past simply lawyering well and into building a successful firm. Working in your firm and working on your business are two very different things. This podcast focuses on the latter. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we are talking about a silent killer that I want to bring up with everyone, which is around the topic of profitability, or maybe a better way to say this is unprofitability. What I've noticed is that there are clients who will bring me their business data, and private clients, as they get onboarded, we really dig into the business and we have a look at all the numbers and we figure out the vision of the firm. And there's so many things for us to figure out, like, okay, here is exactly where we are. Here's where we want to go. How are we going to bridge that gap? And when we're doing the here is exactly where we are work, we dig heavily into the numbers. And here's what I'm noticing. There are law firm owners out there, and you very well may be in this camp, that think that they are profitable. They think that their margins are fine. They may not know exactly what they are, but they're good. They can take home a paycheck and they can afford that, and they can afford to pay all of the expenses in the firm. And yeah, like it's all running, right? And though they may not know the margin exactly, they just feel like everything is okay there. All right. So we take their message and that's what they think. And then we go and look at the actual numbers. And what sometimes happens is that they're actually in the red, meaning that the money that's flowing into the business is less than the money that's flowing out of the business. And so at first you might think, well, how do they not know that? How can they not feel that? There's a few things to mention here. Number one, when you have a lot of money moving around, just cash flow, right? There's a lot of money moving around, especially when you get upwards of 500K. You can feel it less and less. The bottom line in having your finger on the pulse of the truth of the situation can actually be trickier. And so it's very important to be very close to all of the numbers that matter so that you know that the health of the business is actually okay and that it is doing what you think it should be doing. So there can be that. It's just harder to get a feel for all that unless you have very specific reports that you look at in a very specific cadence. But the other reason, let's just say that, that aside, there's two other reasons why maybe you don't realize or feel that the business is in the red. One is that there's credit card debt being floated. And I would say there's a small percentage of the time that that's the case when people are coming to us, but not all the time, right? And so then what? Okay, so if we're not floating credit card debt, which just means clearly you just don't feel the margin as much because you're floating it. Okay, well then the other reason is that you actually have cash in the bank. If you have a significant amount of cash in the bank, then it's easy to not feel when the cash flowing out of the business is exceeding the cash coming into the business because you have this safety net of cash. Now, my hunch is that this could be more of an issue in the last year and a half because there's been cash injected into businesses that's provided some sense of safety net in many cases that will prevent you from really understanding or feeling when there's more going out of the business than what's coming in. And it may be okay, right? Like I was talking to a client who, she's an attorney, she has her own firm, and she's also an accountant. And so we were talking about this, and she was giving instances where like, well, then it's okay. Like it's showing that the business is in red, but everything's okay because they know that this cash is here and they are spending that cash that's set aside. They're spending it on things for the business that they had planned. And we talked through some different scenarios and I totally get it. I understand all of that. In my head, my brain skitzes out, or like, it feels like the record stops, like screeches to a halt, which is that clients don't know. They don't know their numbers and they actually think that their margin is fine. and they aren't doing something strategic with the cash in the bank. It is just kind of sitting afloat. And so the problem that I have been talking to certain clients about is that they don't realize that they have an unprofitable business. And there's going to come a point, they're going to keep growing, likely, right? And so if they are unprofitable and things continue in the same direction and they don't course correct some of that or just wake up to some of that, then when the cash starts to run out, that heavier balance starts to run out, which it will deplete itself over time if this isn't being paid attention to, then you're going to be in an unpleasant situation. What I'm noticing is this is happening for more and more people that I'm encountering when I first meet them. And so I wanted to do a podcast episode about this because it's important for you to know if you are in the red, meaning like you are unprofitable, and there isn't a strategic reason for the way that looks on paper. You should know that. And there's a lot of people that don't know that. And that's okay. There isn't judgment around any of it. But I wanted to do this episode. I think there's probably going to be many of you listening to this that you actually aren't certain about certain margins, and you aren't certain if you are floating the business and you don't realize you're floating the business because there's cash there. So I wanted everybody to be able to take away what you will from this episode. I have a couple of pieces of advice and guidance. But take away what you will from this episode and go back to your corner of the world and you figure out for yourself the answers that you need. And if you can't get them on your own, get them. Get them from your accountant. Get them from your CFO if you use a CFO, fractional or otherwise. Get them from somewhere. Have someone help you if you're struggling to get the information that you need to get. Because as a business owner, the best thing you can do for yourself is to get data in your hands. Facts and not feelings, numbers and not hunches. What I'm realizing through certain scenarios with clients is that if they have had this quarter over quarter, their business has been unprofitable and they didn't know that, and there's cash set aside and they aren't using it for something specific, it really is just kind of being there as a safety net. It's not being used. That's fine, but you should know that the business is dipping into that. And that's why everything feels okay. And, is that your scenario? Or a credit card, right? But is that your scenario? Just get really clear on the numbers behind the business so that you are certain that the business is healthy. And if it isn't healthy, then you can start to figure out what steps to take in order to get it healthy. Here's what I'll say also. I feel like this is a good time to say it. When I talk to clients about this, I do not pretend to be an accountant. I am not a CFO. That is not what I do. But what I do is that we look at the numbers of the business and can identify, like it stands out to me when something seems a little off. And the client is, we look at these numbers together and it's like, did you know that was what the number was? And so often the answer is no, I didn't. And that's okay. But good that we're doing this exercise so that everybody can be very awake at the wheel and make some decisions accordingly. So there's oftentimes I will push people towards back to their accountant and strengthen that relationship with the accountant because there really isn't a reason that the client shouldn't have known this prior. Or hire, Cathedral Capital, which is a fractional CFO company, and they've helped certain clients of mine really wake up to some things financially. That's my job, is to be able to help the business owner wake up and make the right decisions based on the data. So I'm not pretending to be a fix-all for the business, that I'm seeing this and we fix it. I can be a part of that solution and helping you decide how you're going to overcome the barrier and how you're going to navigate getting profitable or getting the number, whatever number you're looking at, to be what you want it to be. Of course, that's what I'm helpful in. But I am not a fix-all for the business. Velocity work is not a fix-all for the business, and I would never pretend to be that. It's important for you to have really strong partnerships with really key people, accountant being one of them. And I think strategic planning and growth being another. So make sure that you are in your head, you're getting right about the relationships you need to develop and strengthen so that you can make the best decisions for the business and that it can really thrive. The impetus for this episode wasn't because there was one huge discrepancy and I felt like I needed to do this episode. to hammer you on, do you know your numbers, et cetera, et cetera. The impetus for the episode was because I'm noticing a trend of law firm owners who are coming in and they actually think that everything is good. They have no idea that the cash that's flowing out of the business is more than the cash coming into the business. And, so that's expenses plus owner's compensation is totaling more than the revenue. And they don't know that. And that should be known. And at least if there is extra cash sitting to the side, that, that was the intended use, was to be able to contribute to this certain expense or whatever. But that isn't what's happening. What is happening is that people are coming and they're very unaware that the money flowing out is greater than the money coming in, and just by a small percentage. So meaning the money going out is about 105% of the revenue. And that can be okay depending on your scenario and your strategy. But when they don't know that, that's a silent killer. That will creep up on them. So in the small percentages, just 5% over in what's going out of the revenue, then that can be, in a $600 business, that's $30K. So that could be just a hair over. It could be $30K here, and then another $30K, and then another $30K just before you know it. And that adds up. And can you deal with it? Sure. But it's going to be a very unpleasant experience when you have to wake up to it versus just waking up to it, being very clear on your numbers, and then making adjustments accordingly. And that's what I don't want for you guys. I want you to be able to have a grip on what the numbers are. And if you're good with them, awesome. And if you want them to shift, great. Now you have a starting place because you have facts and not feelings. That's what I wanted this episode to be about. So there's a couple of things I want to offer. One is that if you don't have a place that you track some basic metrics, I have a tracking sheet that you can go download. So if you go to velocitywork.com/spreadsheet, you will have access to a sheet there that's just super basic. It's really basic, but it houses in one place information about the revenue coming in, the number of cases coming in, the average revenue per case is calculated for you, net income is calculated, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a really good foundation for you to have a read on just the very, very basic numbers. And it'll kickstart you really looking at things in one place. And you can customize it to you. You have to make a copy so that you can edit what you get. But once you make a copy of it, then it's yours to edit and customize and fit your business based on the practice areas, et cetera. So feel free to play with that and use it to be a bit of a dashboard for yourself with the very basic stuff. And if you don't know how to get some of the numbers that go in there, that's so good to know, because all of the numbers that go in there, you should be able to easily get your hands on. And so if you can't, it's like, oh, okay, I need to figure this out, right? So use that tracking sheet because it can wake you up to things that are specific to your business. And then the second thing I would say is, when I was thinking about how does this creep up on people, and maybe it is because of COVID and PPP loans and just the cash that's been, injected into businesses, and it prevents you from feeling certain things, and you haven't really been strategic with the money, then okay, now you've got some money sitting there that is floating you and you don't really realize that it's floating you. And how does that happen, right? And so as I thought about this, it's almost like, if this happens quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter, it's going to add up, and it's really going to start to eat into the cushion that you have. So I would go back at least to the beginning of 2020. So this is 7 quarters ago when this is airing in real time. You have 7 full quarters behind you since the beginning of 2020. And you can go back even further if you need to, if you are noticing things that make you need to dive in more deeply. But you have 7 quarters to report on. I would look at the income, total income. I would look at the total cash out. So expenses, owner compensation. So look at the total cash out. And then when you subtract the total cash out from the total income, if that number is negative, just do the math and put the number there. And when you look back, do that for every quarter. And when you look back at each quarter, I would start to just be aware of, did you know you were negative that many times? Did you know that you were negative here and here and here and by that amount? I think that's a good place to start, because if you are negative more than you thought you were, then you have to understand what that means. You have to understand that you're eating into something that you didn't know you were eating into. Now, if you knew that that was the case and you'd planned for that because of X, Y, and Z, and this cash was here to be strategically used to take care of something, and so of course it's going to be dipping into it, that's different. Then you had a strategy with it. I still would look at all that. I still would look at your quarters. And did the money do what it was supposed to do, or did more of it get eaten up than you had intended? Or I still would look at these things. But I think that's a good starting place to give you guys some advice on is go back to the last quarters since the beginning of 2020 and just have a look at cash flow and get right about it. And if it's different than you thought it was, or if there's anything surprising, you got some work to do, right? And such a good spot to be in. Even if it feels a little deflating or defeating, hey, you actually know the number. That's so much better than having your head in the sand. Now you can reach out to someone to be helpful with that. An accountant, and your accountant, a new accountant, if you're not happy with the fact that you didn't know some of these things. So just do what you need to do, make some calls, but you can't really make great decisions unless you have the facts and not feelings. So that's my episode to you today, is just to think through, because the small unprofitability can be a silent killer if you don't have a strategy for what's happening and you really don't understand what's going on. And it just feels like everything's okay because you're able to pay yourself. You're able to cover all of the expenses in the firm. It's kind of like, yeah, we're good and we have cash in the bank. But if you just don't realize that it's getting chipped away at in small amounts, the problem is that the business is unprofitable and you didn't know that. So when your cash reserves get low, then what? Then you'll get yourself into a freaking pickle. That's what we'll say. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. And yeah, go get the spreadsheet, velocitywork.com/spreadsheet. If that feels useful, go for it. And yeah, evaluate your quarters for the last, at least to the beginning of 2020. All right, everyone. Have a great week. I will see you here next Tuesday. Hey there. If you enjoyed this podcast, I highly recommend you come and check out Mastery Group. It is where owner attorneys come together to study this material, apply it, and thus create really big results for their firm and for their life. So come on over, velocitywork.com/join to get more information and get started. Show notes from this episode can be found at velocitywork.com/podcast.